Hello, my mystical mushrooms. Welcome back to my channel. Thank you for being here with me. And today I am dressed like this because it's business time, baby. It is business time. After many, many moons of doing my thing as an online reader and teacher in the tarot space, I've decided that it's time to take on the gargantuan project of 78 videos outlining my feelings and thoughts on the 78 tarot cards. I don't know what the hell I think I'm doing introducing this to my channel. It is going to be a big meaty thing to bite off, but I'm just going to go with it, and hopefully by the end of it you will thank me, my darlings, because there's going to be 78 full videos describing my breakdown of each of the cards. I'm going to be really informal with this series. I'm just going to vibe with each of the cards, talking a little bit about their light and shadow aspects, or their, strengths and weaknesses, active and dormant, however you want to see it, and a bit about my journey with each of the cards. Every one of these vibing with videos is not going to be my complete breakdown of every single meaning of the card, every layer of nuance and depth, because that would take so much time. It's really going to be me thinking about whatever I'm thinking about in the moment and just talking lovingly about each of the cards. If you do not know me, if you've only just turned up here, hello, welcome. My name is Maddox, obviously. I am a tarot teacher, I'm a card slinger professionally, I'm a witchcraft mentor, I'm an author, and I'm a qualified spiritual counsellor. I welcome you to go and look at my website. If you don't know me and you want to know more about me, you can look there at, the About My Work page and the About Me page and get to know me a little bit more, get to know my angle and my perspective on things. And if you would like a reading with me, my darlings, there is so much to choose from. A client of mine just described my online store the other day as a sweet shop, a veritable candy store of different things. And that is very true. There are lots of spread designs that I've come up with over time. So go over there, take a look, find something that tickles your pickle and get booked into my schedule. There are new things on offer at the moment. So I do have some new spread designs never before seen in the Kellyanne Maddox world. So if you want to have a look at the new stuff, then please go ahead. But there are lots of righteous, very sort of tried and tested spreads that have been up for sale for a very long time. So yeah, don't be afraid. Come and work with me. If you like the way I speak about the cards, then you will love the way that I read them. And without further ado, let's get started. We're going to begin with the Fool, obviously. Card 0, the very beginning of the journey in the 78 card deck of tarot. And this is the Fool from the Tattoo Tarot. I love this deck. And you can see here he looks like rather a brave adventurer, which is a very cool depiction of the Fool. The Fool is very often represented as somewhere between a brave, bold adventurer who's going out on a quest, right? A hero at the beginning of a journey, all the way through to like a bumbling jester, a silly joker, someone that's not looking where the hell they're going, someone at whom we can laugh or with whom we can laugh. So the imagery does kind of like run the gamut from one to the other, but I really enjoy this very strong, brave, inspiring depiction in Tattoo Tarot. It kind of sort of deepens into a lot of the things that I think and feel about the Fool. So I guess where I want to start, well, first of all, let me take a sip of my beverage. Trying to get the informal vibe going here, which is actually a bit difficult in a burnt orange tie. Yeah, it's like formal wear, but an informal vibe for this video. I've got some ice because it is actually slightly warm in England today. So ice has become a little bit more relevant, which is great because we've all been freezing our tits off here for some months. Okay, so let me think about what I want to say about the Fool. Let's begin with some of the wondrous aspects of the Fool, some of the things that I love absolutely the most about this figure in tarot. First of all, the Fool has like added gravitas a lot of the time when I read tarot, because the Fool is the very beginning of the journey of the deck. The Fool is the absolute genesis. It's where everything begins. And so whenever I see the Fool come up in a reading, there is kind of like that added weight and that added power to it for that reason. It feels highly significant because not only is it a representation of a bright beginning, a new start, a fresh way of seeing things, a fresh plan, but it's also really, really representative of that because it is the first card in the deck. It's the beginning of the actual journey of tarot. And it would have been the very first card that I saw because the first deck that I opened was in order. And so the very first card I would have seen back when I was 12 years old would have been the Fool. So There's something really spiritually meaningful for me about the Fool as far as cards go. One of the big things about the Fool that is so potent is, of course, the notion of beginner's mind, the idea of openness. The Fool is at the very beginning. So the Fool really has not yet developed any sense of like cynicism or apathy or strong belief or philosophy around anything much that he's going to be seeing, because like they're not yet seeing anything. They have not yet gathered any information. They are in fact an open channel, a receptacle for information to, you know, make its way to them, but they haven't really gathered and assumed and decided upon anything yet. They're right at the start, you know. So there is that beautiful sense of like mental and spiritual purity in the way of kind of being open to what is coming through and not putting anything through a very strong bias. The Fool is like an open tourist, you know. The Fool is willing to be kind of like led along by instinct or by interest or by information that they pick up along the way. They don't have a really strong, solid plan of what is going to happen. They are open to influence, they're open to suggestion, they're open to inspiration. And that's very much one of the most beautiful vibes about the Fool card, is that sense of openness, that sense of willingness and readiness to try something different, to try something new, to be in the state of birth and in the state of wild, vulnerable curiosity that comes after that state of birth, where you're just kind of like crawling around, looking at everything and being overwhelmed by and captivated by everything that's going on with your five senses and all of the wild and loud and overwhelming splendid things that are going on around you. And there is this notion with the Fool that there is a sense of exploration there, that inquisitive nature that comes when you're just willing to take a road and see what happens, to, you know, as Hunter S. Thompson put it, to buy the ticket and take the ride. That's very much one of the most beauteous things for me about the Fool. It's about buying the ticket and taking the fucking ride. And so there is a sort of bravery to the Fool, and there's an open-hearted willingness to be enveloped by everything. And that's something about the Fool that clearly makes me overjoyed, because I'm grinning from ear to ear just talking about it. In the Dust to Onyx Tarot by Courtney Alexander, the Fool is renamed the Emerging One. And when I first saw that deck, and I really love that deck, the Dust to Onyx Tarot, it's beautiful. And when I saw that the Fool had been renamed the Emerging One, I was like, oh wow, that is so much what the card is about for me as a reader. You know, it's got so much to do with coming out in full innocence and in full openness, fresh, you know, and really coming into the atmosphere, coming into the environment for the first time, and having to just go with it and roll with it and see what happens and see what is in the becoming and what is in the unfolding. So, you know, it's beautiful in that way. It's such a gorgeous card to work with in that sense. I think one thing that doesn't get talked about as much as I would like is that the Fool is a card about faith and belief. You know, it's a card about really taking a deep breath, stepping out and believing that the things that you cannot see right now, the things that you cannot understand right now, the plan that is not there yet, that will come together, that will become more obvious, that will make itself known as you put one foot in front of the other, as you do your thing and you move forward, right? So the Fool has to have a great deal of faith and has to take that leap of faith. And there really is something incredibly brave about that. There is a huge courage in that, to know that, you know what, I don't have to have everything planned out. I don't have to have everything organized. I don't have to know how things are going to go. I have the strength and the willingness and the bravery and the wildness of heart to be able to gather my information as I go, get access to more different doors and aspects of the map as I go, and to believe that as I go along, I will strengthen and I will mature and I will see more and I will know more. But just because I don't know those things now, just because I don't have access right now to that stability or that insight, does not mean that I'm not going to emerge. You know, hell no, I'm fucking emerging, and I'm going to believe that as I emerge, I'm going to strengthen up, I'm going to learn, and things are going to come together. But I'm not going to let that fear of being small or being pure or being naive or being kind of like underdeveloped, I'm not going to let that fear stop me from living, from doing, from seeing, from experiencing. So there does have to be a kind of ballsiness to the Fool, and that's something that I've always really connected to with this card. If you think about the courage of the Fool, it's the courage to not have to have everything defined, you know, because I think that can come from a place of fear. If we need to know everything, have everything sorted out before we take any steps forward, you know, if we need to have a solidity to everything, then we're not being open to the idea that there are so many layers of meaning that we don't know, and there are so many things that are unfamiliar to us. And so if you think about the bravery of the Fool, it's the bravery of not needing to know before getting started. You know, it's in the doing and in the going and in the experiencing that you will find out and you will understand and you will mature. So it's really this feeling of, I don't need to have everything all sorted before I take the leap, before I step out there, before I emerge. And so that's powerful. And I think the Fool is interesting too, because it's a very strong archetype within us that very often other parts of us argue with. So the Fool, I think, is the part of me that is like, you know, no risk, no story, baby. Go, do it. You know, you're ready. You're ready now. There's no time for anything else. Don't wait. The Fool is very connected to my sense of death in a way, because whenever I think about death, whenever I think about the fact that I'm one day going to be pushing up daffodils, right? I'm not going to be here. My body is going to be food for worms, baby. Whenever I think about that, I get into my Fool mode where I just feel like, you know what, I'm going to do it now. If I want to emerge, I'm just going to emerge. There isn't time for all this planning and replanning and checking and rehashing and making sure and being safe and doing it the right way. The Fool is just more like, I got a knapsack of shit, let's go. Anything else I'll get when I'm there. I don't know the language, I'll learn it. I don't know the steps, I'll find them. I don't have the key, it's somewhere around here. Like, let me just go and do the thing. So I think the Fool is often the part of me that is very eager to live before I die. And there are other aspects of me, which, you know, the Virgo moon being chief among them, but there are other aspects of me that are like, whoa, no, hey, hang on. Like, don't be so hasty. Don't be so crazy. Don't be so wild at heart. Like, let's think about things. Let's really go over things. Let's practice caution. Let's be a little bit more conservative with what it is that we're going to do. Obviously, I don't have much of those parts because the Virgo moon is very much being done battle with by the Sag sun in my case. But I think for all of us, the Fool is that part that is like daring and doesn't feel that they need to have all of the answers in order to take the steps. And so your inner Fool is going to be argued with by other parts of you that are more careful and less reckless, and that do actually want to know before taking steps. And so it's interesting, really, where does the Fool fit in? How can we allow our inner Fool, our inner hero at the beginning of the quest, to do its thing and have the space and move around in the world and take the risks, whilst also protecting ourselves from utter recklessness, from total ruin and disaster, from naivety, which is the other side of the Fool, right, that we'll come to, because I want to talk a little bit more about the beauty and the positives first before I go into the shadow stuff. But you know, there is that sense that our Fool has to be sort of doing business with or in negotiation with some other parts of us that are more about being careful and being self-preservational. The Fool is not naturally self-preservational, but only insofar as the Fool kind of knows that if we're too self-preservational and if we're too cautious, we'll never do the thing, we'll never get started. You know, we have to be willing to know that we do not know what we do not know, and that we have to go regardless, and that the knowing is in the doing, right? The knowing is in the doing. So I think whenever I see the Fool pop up, I feel, no matter what position it's placed in, I feel happy. I feel like, wow, this is the beginning, it's potential, it's opportunity, it's the unknown, it's excitement, it's quest, it's mission, it's adventure. You know, it's really so inquisitive, so curious, and there's a playfulness to the Fool. I really love how playful the Fool is. And, you know, when we look at the imagery for the Fool, sometimes the Fool is, you know, this heroic adventurer that looks very kind of like, I'm going to go and I'm going to do the damn thing, as is presented in the Tattoo Tarot. Sometimes the Fool is more a jester, you know, a silly figure, someone we would laugh at, someone we might laugh with, someone who's about to fall over, someone who's not looking where they're going, someone who's not thinking about the obvious things that might pose a danger. So there is that spectrum in the imagery of the Fool. But when it comes to the idea of just kind of like the gladness of being alive and the gladness of being in the unfolding and learning from the unfolding, the Fool has my heart in that respect. The Fool is so much that kind of card. And so I really love it for that reason. I love the Fool because the Fool is a figure in tarot who doesn't have much, but who obviously doesn't think that that should stop them from living the fullest and most beauteous and most adventurous life possible. You know, the Fool very notably often just has a very small knapsack of things. They're dressed usually very simply, and they're just going out on an adventure, a huge adventure. You have the sense that this is a real worldly quest, and yet they've not been that concerned with stocking up on worldly wealth, you know, or really being overtly connected to the material. In fact, the Fool is probably going on a long journey where they're going to subsist on little, or they're going to stay in different places. They're not going to have a set abode. They are a traveler at the beginning. And so even in that respect, they are not looking really for stability. They know that they have had to compromise stability in order to receive the adventure. You know, they couldn't have both. They couldn't stay home and go on the adventure. They couldn't remain hibernated and also emerge. They had to make the choice. And that choice, even by itself, is courageous and shows the values of the Fool. The Fool is not that concerned, you know, in the kind of King of Pentacles regard, with amassing and building and developing and growing something that will demonstrate the fruits of labor. The Fool is more concerned with, like, you know, a rolling stone gathers no moss. You know, the less I have to worry about. Like, let's keep it simple. Let's keep it basic. Let's just purify it and like kind of shave it down to just the essentials and go. And in that way, the Fool has always been a teacher for me, because I'm not really like that. You know, I'm always the one with kind of like the Mary Poppins bag with the different things in it that anybody might need. I don't really enjoy long form traveling where you go from country to country out of a bag. I've never really been that kind of traveler. I love going and seeing different places in the world, but it's very little of my life that I've spent literally traveling from place to place without a plan to stay somewhere for a while. And that's in part because of my mental health issues. I'm not the type of person that can be kind of like a ragtag or just go wherever, do whatever type of traveler. I'm not into that. I'm an enthusiastic tourist, but I like stability. I like a sort of itinerary. I like to know where I'll be staying, for how long, and what the amenities will be. The Fool gives me more that sense of just like, you know, there's only so much planning you can do before you just go, and, you know, just cast off the burden of materiality and the need to know and the need to be, you know, fully adjusted to the situation and all of this crap, and just kind of like be freewheeling, be light in yourself. Know that whatever you don't have, that you worry about, that you left behind or whatever, can either be replaced, or it can be mourned, or you'll get back to it eventually, or it will come round in some other form. So in many ways, the Fool is a big spiritual teacher for me. A teacher that sort of reminds me to be in my raw and childish state, and just to be curious, to taste and touch and sense everything without being too serious and too grown up and too much of a planner about things. So in a way, it's kind of like a stay young, like chill, don't sweat it, baby, just go with it. You know, I need that sometimes. And I really love the Fool for being so connected to the concept of beginner's mind. Very often when the Fool comes up for clients, depending, of course, upon the spread position and the other cards that are involved, it's a reminder for the client that they really need to let go of what it is that happened before. Don't worry about the previous patterns. Don't judge this situation based on another situation. This has got to be something that you look at with fresh eyes, that you assert yourself with newly, instead of thinking about previous things that have happened and always judging everything by those previous iterations of the experience. So the Fool can very much be about letting go of your cynicism, letting go of what it is that you're very hard line about, you know, being more free in your philosophy, really being open to new ideas or a new way of doing things. You know, the Fool for somebody, for example, for someone who would be at the very beginning of a new project or a new relationship, the Fool would be a card that might come up if they really had to let go of any assumptions or worries, or sort of predictions that they were making based on old shit. The Fool is really about like, this is going to be different. You're going to be a different version of yourself while this is happening to you. You've got to let go, shake out all of that rigidity around what could happen, what's likely to happen, you know, get rid of that jadedness, get rid of that really narrow sense of what's going to be. The Fool is much more open to the fact that there is a realm of different potentials and different possibilities, you know, that there is so many hidden doorways and hidden avenues that you will stumble across and go down. And so the sense of the world to the Fool is big. The sense of possibility to the Fool is mammoth, you know. It's not about like, well, you know, I've got this very small sense or this very small ideal or this very small vision of what could happen and I'm going to stick to that. The Fool is kind of like, get rid of that. That's not helpful. Let's really be expansive in our sense of what could be possible in this situation, and let's think about how things could be different and new instead of always suspecting that everything will be the same. So I think in some ways the Fool can be seen as a cycle breaker. The Fool can be seen as the radical part of ourselves that is willing to believe that something different could be possible, that there are things that we don't know, because sometimes I think we can be extremely rigid in our view of things based on what has happened to us and what our experiences have been. And we do learn from our experiences, but we're also trapped by our experiences. And the Fool is a card that often comes along when we are being asked to set that stuff at the door. You know, if you want to go on this journey, you've got to come without that baggage. You've got to attend this journey with the sense that other stuff could be the case. And you can't have that while you're rigidly sticking to your old worries or your old paradigms. It's not going to work that way. So it's paradigm shaking, cycle breaking stuff with the Fool, which I really love about this card. On the shadow side, obviously, one of the key things about the Fool that comes up for a lot of readers, and for me also, is the naivety. You know, it's kind of the beautiful side of it, the empowered side of it is the innocence, the openness, the willingness, the adventure. But on that shadow side, then we've got the naivety, we've got the vulnerability, we've got that sense of somebody at risk because they do not really understand everything that's going on around them to the extent where they could protect themselves, they could preserve themselves, and they could make wise and reasonable decisions. So the shadow of the Fool is more in that side where things have become dangerous for someone in their Fool energy because they're so willing to take this huge quest, but they are so unarmed with the information that may be needed to stop them from doing, saying, or agreeing to something that could be harmful to them. So there is that other side with the Fool. I think that also leads into things like recklessness, you know, unwise abandon, the sense that the Fool is that part of us that's going to run headlong into something that we haven't inquired about and that we haven't been cautious over. So the Fool can be very complicated for some people when they're learning tarot, because I think that side of the Fool, that naivety and like, you know, cluelessness and, you know, sort of silly mistakes and this figure doesn't know anything. I think that part is quite hyped up in a lot of the tarot resources. Like a lot of the books that have been written over time about tarot really emphasize the idea of the Fool as kind of like a bumbling idiot, you know, a figure that is really foolish, like that is just like, oh, I'll do it, I'm fine, it'll all be fine, and they haven't thought things through. And it's hard because a lot of readers can only think about the Fool in that regard. And I think that's really unfair to the Fool. I think the Fool, as I just spoke about in the earlier part of this video, the Fool has all this other shit that's incredible and can really teach you. But it would be wrong of me to make a video like this and not riff a little bit about the naivety and the recklessness and the foolishness and the lack of forethought, lack of awareness that can lead to mistakes, and it can lead to harm. It can lead to the Fool harming themselves and harming others. So let's talk about that a little bit and get into my personal journey with that and how I think about that a little bit more. I'm going to down this and then do a jump cut because this is just so delicious.
A few moments later.
So the Fool can be a very vulnerable figure in tarot and can be prone to being taken advantage of. So that's one of the shadow aspects that comes up. And I do think of the Fool as being unguarded and unprotected because they largely don't have a sense of what it is they have to be guarded with or protected from at this point in time, right? They are right on the cusp. They're right at the beginning and they're willing to go into the situation knowing that they are kind of like unarmored, or not even sensing that they need to be armored because they don't know what they would need to be armored from, you know? So there is that sense that there is a high risk with the Fool, the risk of kind of, you know, being hurt. And I think also, and this is something that I don't see come up that often with discussions around the Fool, but what I've found from reading with the Fool for all this time is that the Fool can also be selfish. The Fool wants what the Fool wants. If the Fool is called to the quest and the call is really in the heart, you know, then they're going to lean into the quest regardless of what is going on where they were before. Like, where are they emerging from? You know what I mean? Are they emerging outwards from some place where they had some responsibilities, or they had unfinished business, they had something they needed to do? Sometimes the Fool can be about that urge to journey that is based very much on like a reckless sense of what one wants. And so one of the shadows of the Fool also can be that sense that they haven't really thought about what is going on with anybody else or what anybody else is doing. I have definitely, in my personal readings in the last year or so, had the Fool come up in relation to how I feel about friends who have been on their journey and doing their thing and having a fabulous time and experiencing new stuff, and have been neglecting their friendship responsibilities to me and other people who are going through difficulties or who are in need of them. And to an extent, it's really important that when someone's in Fool mode, they're able to be in Fool mode. But it's really quite sad and quite savage, isn't it? When somebody is in Fool mode, absolutely regardless of you, absolutely regardless of anything you've done for them or anything they said they would do for you. They're just on their own trip, doing their own thing, like taking care of their own business and having a fabulous time, and not really calling home, not really checking in, you know, not really being grounded in the pre-existing framework that they had set out, which is sometimes part of the strong foundation that allows them to launch into the journey. So I think the Fool can be sometimes a selfish part of us, the part of us that is like, well, I want to go and do this thing and leave this life and have another life. And it's like, okay, but sometimes you are walking away from something pre-existing that you claimed to have responsibility to. And so the Fool can be about like forgetting home even exists and therefore not even calling to check in. So that can definitely be a part of it. The recklessness, I think that shadow of the Fool is interesting. It's really a foolhardiness. Sometimes it can be from a sense of misplaced confidence in oneself. The idea that like whatever happens, I can deal with it, and whatever comes, I have the strength to figure it out, without being really honest about the fact that you're not just full of powers and strengths. You're also full of flaws and weaknesses. You're not just, you know, understanding enough to be able to get by. You're also sometimes woefully misunderstanding things that need to be explained to you. And so the Fool can be reckless, definitely, overconfident, definitely, mistaken in their ability to be able to handle some of the things that are going to come out of the woodwork that are going to really like shock or affect the Fool negatively. There is like a real sense of frivolity in the Fool, and sometimes maybe a shallowness that can be one of the shadows, because the Fool is so much concerned with like experiencing, tasting, touching, living, you know, being in the unfolding of everything. And so sometimes the Fool actually doesn't have a great deal of seriousness. And that is why sometimes it's interesting that they're portrayed in a kind of jester-like way. And in those decks where there is that more jester vibe, I think it's really clever, because one of the aspects of the Fool that can be more shadowy or more problematic is the notion of the Fool as kind of like this laughing, giggling, nothing means anything anyway kind of person who isn't really sort of deepening into the seriousness of the connectivity between things and the role that the Fool might be asked to play, or what might come up that might actually have serious consequences if they don't take it seriously enough. So there's a lack of awareness there, but that also leads to a lack of maturity and a lack of willingness to really see the gravity of some things that are genuinely important, and maybe one day later down the line they will be important to the Fool, but because they're not important right now, a person in their Fool era might kind of overlook them or downplay them or laugh about them or laugh them off, you know, or mock them even, and then later on wish that, like, you know what, damn, I wish I hadn't done it that way. That was not fair of me. That was really casting aside other people's feelings or casting aside what my own future needs will have been. And so I should have taken that more seriously at the time. So there is kind of like a frivolous Joker type of vibe to the Fool. Not Joker in the Batman sense, but Joker in the kind of like jester type of sense, where there is that notion of kind of just having so much fun with it that you don't realize that you're harming people, harming yourself, or harming your future chances of success. The Fool might look a gift horse in the mouth in a sense. They might kind of like skip over or undervalue the nature of spiritual sustenance that they come across on their journey, because they're not yet sort of wizened enough or aware enough to figure out how valuable it is. And so they might be kind of faced with an incredible spiritual lesson or a really sage piece of of advice or a situation that could be very illuminating to them, but because they're in Fool mode, they're overlooking it. They're not realizing the intensity of it and how valuable it could be. And so they don't pick it up, they don't take it in, they're not really paying attention to it. And then later on, there might be some regret about that. And obviously also there is just this sense of so much vulnerability with the Fool, you know, that they could be walking into the mouth of danger. They could be walking into something that they don't truly understand, you know, the full effects of. And so when you look at the Fool, sometimes you think of yourself having walked into those situations in the past and been naive to how badly they would hurt or how big the consequences would be. But sometimes when you look at the Fool, you think about someone going through that themselves and how you want to protect them. For example, the Fool sometimes makes me feel quite parental, even though I don't have any children myself and I don't plan on having children. I am maternal in many ways. And sometimes when I see the Fool, I want to protect them, you know, like in the Wild Unknown Tarot, the Fool is this little like fledgling bird, isn't it? That's kind of like on a branch and it looks really shaky and new. I think it's on a branch anyway. It's either a bird or like a duckling or something. But it's this teeny little bird with like fluffy new plumage that's not adult yet. Like you can see clearly that this bird cannot fly yet. They're a tiny little gorgeous thing. And I think that's a really clever depiction of the Fool in the Wild Unknown Tarot, because whenever I see that depiction of the card, I want to leap in through the card edges, pick that little bird up and just protect it, hold it, make it safe, you know? And so there is also that sense with the Fool of just like how graphically, tangibly breakable, beautiful, sweet, pure, innocent things are. And when you look at them, you know, sometimes there is that parental instinct where you want to almost like restrict their journey and restrict their access to truth, because you want to restrict their exposure to danger and to understanding just how bad the world can get. So the Fool often makes me feel like, yes, okay, I've been the Fool. Sometimes I want to be the Fool. Sometimes I wish I hadn't been the Fool. But there's also this other layer in the shadow of the Fool where I see the Fool depicted and I think, I don't want anyone to be in this kind of situation. I want to save, I want to protect, I want to overgive, I want to nurture, I want to nurse. And that can make one's life very small, you know? And same goes for if you want to be nurtured and nursed and watched over and protected and infantilized. But then there's this other part of you that's like, I want to be free. I want to be sovereign. Get away from me. I'll make my own fucking mistakes. You know, don't tell me what to do. I will learn for myself. So the Fool has kind of an adamant sacred rebellion kind of vibe to it in the shadow, where you might sometimes just want everyone to let the fuck go and let you be who you want to be. And sometimes you have to encourage yourself to do that for someone or something, you know, like a creative project, a person in your life you care about, like your own child or your partner, whatever it might be, where you really want to give so much protection. You want to prevent pain so much. You want to shield someone or something from danger so much that you're suffocating it. You are literally like, you know, swaddling it up so tightly that it can't live. And in order for things to live fully and be fully exposed to all of life, you have to accept the risk of danger. You have to accept the risk of damage and disaster and breakage and pain and loss and heartbreak, rejection. The Fool is exposed to all of those things. The shadow of the Fool is this idea that they would be exposed to those things without understanding them, but also that we would want to stop exposure to those things. And we can't do that. That's not how life works, you know? So the Fool is also tapping me in, I think, to that ever-present need to let things be. And if shit goes wrong, shit goes wrong. That's not a mistake. That's part of life too. And we learn from those things, you know? So is the Fool going to make some mistakes? Yeah, but are they gonna be offered every opportunity to learn from them? Yes, and sometimes the learning will be harsh. It will feel savage by Dior, mate. It really will. But the learning will happen nonetheless. The Fool can be really in a hurry. The Fool can just be altogether too impulsive. The Fool can just kind of appear outwardly to not know what they're doing and therefore attract danger through attracting people or energies that would seek to take advantage or seek to kind of drain the Fool of their already small resources. So there are things to think about there in that regard. And like I said, the Fool can be kind of an insensitive joker, the part of us that doesn't really feel overtly connected to what it is that's going on. It hasn't thought of the seriousness and the gravitas of what's going on. So little bit there about sort of the light and shadow of how I feel about the Fool. I feel largely really positive about the Fool. I definitely went through a period of my life as a reader where I felt a little bit like uninterested or a little bit bored when the Fool came up. I think because the treatment of the Fool in tarot resources is quite heavy-handed. There are those certain cards, aren't there, where the treatment of the interpretations is really quite heavy-handed and you don't get a nuanced sense of what else the card is about. And the heavy-handed treatment of the Fool is very much connected to like, yeah, you know, it's lack of awareness, mistakes, idiocy, silliness, immaturity, not knowing what you're doing, you know, foolish, bumbling, silly person, silly person, silly person. And I wanted more. I wanted to feel like I was really biting into the Fool and I was like really biting down into the juice of what that card could be about. And I think that only came a little bit later. I think the Fool does have an incredible wisdom, you know, the wisdom of the hero on their quest. The idea that you would caution the Fool to do things in a comfortable, safe way. And the Fool would almost kind of laugh at you and be like, you know what, like, fear does not lead to freedom. You know, I don't want to do things the comfortable way. I know that whatever happens to me when I fall off this cliff is exactly what needs to happen, whether angels catch me or whether I crash to the floor, baby, like that's what needs to happen. So I think the Fool does have a lot of the time that natural awareness of the fact that like, things are going to go how they go. And so the Fool can direct me in that way. But the Fool can also, in the shadowy area, be the part of me that is foolhardy, that suspects that they know more than they really do, that hasn't really thought things through that could do with being thought through a little bit more. So it's a spectrum, you know, and I would love to know, where do you fall on that spectrum with the Fool? How do you feel about the card as a whole? What kind of image do you like to see of the Fool? How do you like to see them illustrated? How do you like to see the pictorial symbolism? And what do you particularly love about the Fool? Tell me what you love most of all about this amazing first figure in tarot, the absolute beginning of the quest, you know, and the emerging. It's a really potent card. It was really nice to sit and vibe with the Fool for a while with you all, and I'll be back next time for vibing with the Magician. I am very excited for that. Thank you, my darlings, so much for listening to me ramble on. Much love, darlings, and blessed be. This is a little message for my patrons. If you are a Pop-Tart or a Dollface over on Patreon, then you are entitled to my Afterthoughts series. This is a video series that I bring out sporadically whenever I feel like I have more to say or I've got a deeper dive to go into. I pop it over on Patreon, and this time there is going to be an Afterthoughts video dedicated to just talking about the journey of the 78 cards, how I try and convey the cards to other people, the light and shadow of the cards, and important reminders for when you're going through and you're really breaking down the meanings of the cards and where they fall for you in your heart and where you are with each of them in terms of the alchemy that they provide, the information, the insight, but also the blocks, the problems, the slip-ups, you know. I want to give you some advice around that. So for all my Pop-Tarts and Dollfaces, you've got something extra, please go over to Patreon to watch the Afterthoughts. And if you are not on my Patreon and you would like to see this Afterthoughts and the others in the series that I've been doing since 2020, you can become a Pop-Tart or Dollface. There's also a cupcakes option as well, which is the lowest tier. You still get lots of awesome added value in the lowest tier too. So whatever you want to do, however you want to join, you'll have access to the Discord. You'll have access to my monthly one card riff videos, printables, affirmations, audio offerings. All that good stuff is available whatever tier you choose. And in the higher tiers, you also get access to the Afterthought series, discounts, lives, poll videos, all that stuff. So please come and check out the Patreon, get yourself involved. If you've been a patron before and you had to hop off and you want to come back on, you know, don't be shy. We'll definitely have you back always. So much love and blessed be. Mwah.